hatred. So that's the more colloquial use of homophobia. Then not only fear of the person, but they hate them. And that's rampant in the church, right? I mean, it's the same kind of bullying that people that, young gay boys, or I would assume lesbian girls, got in the playground, right? Third, I think a misinterpretation of what's important in the moral life. And this elevation of LGBT issues as the only thing is really skewed. And I think a lot of that has to do with, what the institutional church has focused on in the last 30 or 40 years, right? This has been elevated that way. And I think also we see this online a lot. And I've talked to many psychologists and psychiatrists about this because I've been confronted online and in person with real rage. Absolute rage. And I said to this psychiatrist friend of mine, where does that come from? It's one thing to kind of disagree, and, I disagree with people and they might disagree with what I'm saying. But the sort of turning red in the face and screaming at me, and the psychiatrist, not, alone, said, it's their own complicated sexuality. And psychiatrists will tell us, and psychologists, that we're all on a continuum, we're all on a spectrum, right? And, there's bisexuality in most people in different degrees. And for some people who are afraid of their complex sexuality, this kind of stuff is just terribly threatening. So the idea that you will be confronted with the reality of homosexuality or bisexuality or even transgenderism is frightening for people. And so they, rather than directing the anger internally, they direct it out at the person. And I know, just for the record, that a lot of people who are critiquing me online are self-professed. This is not my sort of reading into it. They will say this on their websites, former gays. So it's a lot of former gay people. And I would say that, there's a lot of conflict going on. So it's sad because what happens is their own junk inside gets focused outwards and on people who are actually trying to live a more integrated life. Celibacy is supposed to be a gift, or it's something that you choose. For the LGBT person, it's, in terms of the catechism and in terms of many Catholic thinkers and Catholic leaders, it is a requirement, and in a sense, it is seen by many LGBT people as an imposition, which is what it sounds like you feel it is.
I do. Maybe I'm now confessing to you my sin of being angry with.
No, well, I would say this. One of the things that I've thought about a lot is the notion, and we're in a theology department, the notion of teachings being received. So, and it's a tradition that I think most people don't know about because it hasn't been really talked about for the last 30 or 40 years, nor has conscience, really. But, for a, briefly put, and I'm no theologian, but, for a teaching to be really authoritative, it is expected that it will be received by the people of God, by the faithful. So you look at something like, say, the Assumption. So the Assumption is declared, and people accept that. They go to the Feast of the Assumption, they believe in the Assumption, it's received. From what I can tell in the LGBT community, the teaching that LGBT people must be celibate their entire lives, not just, before marriage, as it is for most people, but their entire lives, has not been received. Now, I say this and people go crazy, and this is simply based on LGBT people that I speak to. Now, there are some that believe that. I would say it's a very small percentage of people, right? But that's a simple fact. You can say that they don't agree with it. I would say the teaching, therefore, has not been received by the community to which it was largely directed. And so the question is, what do we do with that? Now, that's the kind of question, to circle back to your original question. That reflection, what do we do with a teaching that has seemingly not been received by the community to which it was directed, is a theological question that bishops and LGBT people need to think about.
Something has changed after the Supreme Court decision. I'm not sure what it is, but I think that adds a little bit more gray to my argument. I still think somebody can make the case that they're not homophobic, but they just don't support gay marriage. But I believe that case is a little more hard-won now after that decision. I'm not sure why I believe that, but that's
Because it's the law of the land, right? I mean, is that what you're saying? That it's,
I think so, yeah.
that in a sense it's harder to oppose it. I mean, I would tend to agree with you, because I would say that you could have some hard and fast and legitimate and reasonable theological objections in terms of the sacramentality, in terms of biblical, provenance, things like that.
Sure.
And even though, we shouldn't read the Bible literally, and Catholics don't read the Bible literally.
Plug out your eye.
Yeah, right. Yeah, thank God we don't. But I also think that, for the most part, I do find that there is a very high correlation between people who are against that and people who are, in fact, homophobic. And so it's that whole hate the sin, love the sinner argument. I know it's not exactly the same, but it reminds me of that. In a sense, people say, well, I can be against gay marriage and not be homophobic. But then when you hear a lot of people, they sound pretty damn homophobic. And I can say hate the sin and love the sinner, but when you listen to them, there's no sense of love at all.
Right.
They never talk about. I'll meet people who will say that, and I'll say, well, what do your gay friends think? And there's just silence, because they don't know any, or it's all former gays.
Yeah.
Right? And so yes, I agree. I think that you can legitimately have non-homophobic, good theological reasons for opposing those things. But I often find that the people who actually do oppose those things are very homophobic, and that is easily discerned. I mean, just by the way they talk about LGBT people and the language they use and the snottiness they have, and so
yeah, it's very
unfortunate.
It's very snide, and it's almost like when you're talking about this just now, I'm hearing when people say, well, I'm not a homophobe, but it almost reminds me a little bit of when people say, I'm not racist, but, and when somebody says that, you just sort of grab the seat.
Yeah, here it comes.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like someone saying, don't take this the wrong way, but ... something terrible is coming. A lot of this really is fear. It's fear, as I said, of something different and something new, and it's pretty noticeable. But more importantly, I think more and more families have gay sons and daughters and siblings and grandchildren and nieces and nephews. And so these families bring into their parishes the hopes and desires of their family members who are LGBT. And so there's a real shift going on. Because even 10 years ago, I think about 10 years ago, which is fairly recently, doing something that you're doing in church, I think, would be harder, certainly. And now it's a little more, okay, well, we're not comfortable with it, but we'll accept it. And this, I think, has a real change in the life of the parish. Because eventually what's going to happen in your parish is that people will come, if they already haven't, to know you. So it won't just be this gay couple who sits in front of me or sits in the pew 3 pews in front of me. It will be Brandon and, you said Andrew, right?
Andy, yeah.
Andy. It will be human beings that they know from parish council or a food drive or RCIA or religious ed. So that's really what's going to change it. It is that encounter. And that's new, I think. So that's actually kind of exciting for me. And I think that one of the reasons that there's so much pushback is that people who oppose this realize that. They realize 2 things. They realize that this is happening, and they're terrified. Mm-hmm. And they realize, I think, that some of the things that I'm talking about in the book in terms of Jesus are correct. That he did, in fact. It's very hard to move away from the fact or deny the fact that Jesus reached out to people on the margins. It's very hard to deny that. And I think one of the things that makes people angry is that they can't deny it, and it's staring them right in the face. And it's a kind of cognitive dissonance. They want to feel that it's bad, but they see Jesus, and it's just infuriating them. And I'm just articulating this for myself now. That's what's going on with a lot of these people.
You know what's really interesting? I mean, speaking about just lay Catholics and numbers, no, not the Book of Numbers, just the numbers of these Catholics.
Well, that's good, because I don't know very much about the Book of Numbers, so we'd be in trouble.
It's like whenever I read some of these conservative Catholic pundits who are sort of very, very staunchly opposed to all things homosexual, they sort of write as if they're unaware that a lot of Catholics actually support me and Andy getting married.
Right.
And it's really interesting because, and this is something that, people like Catholic ethicists point out a lot in their books, at some point, theological teaching does have to come into contact with the shape of things on the ground. And in the U.S., the shape of things on the ground is such that a lot of Catholics do support gay marriage.
Yeah, I think that's true. There's two refinements of that, though. One is that in other parts of the world it's not. And so for the church to change on that would mean that, in sub-Saharan Africa, you really probably would be run out of the church. I mean, run out of the physical church. You'd probably be, I lived in Kenya for 2 years. You'd probably be ejected, or certainly made to feel like you weren't welcome. People would be somewhat vocal. And the second thing is that for some people, what the theologians say is different than what the church leaders would say, as we know. So there's a disconnect between that legitimate reflection, which is that theology should take into account the experience of people of God, right? And that the Holy Spirit is working in them. But on some of these questions, I think that church leaders resist that. They resist that very notion, which is in fact sort of the reception of teaching, right? And there's resistance to that because a lot of it's from the top down. I mean, you take something without getting into a big discussion. I mean, look at Humanae Vitae. Humanae Vitae is still in effect. And as far as I can tell, the large majority of Western Catholics have made their peace with that. And yet that church teaching has not changed. And that's a much older church teaching. I mean, in a sense, that's Humanae Vitae is 1968, and a lot of stuff we're talking about is very new. I mean, people to reflect on LGBT stuff. So the question is, again, there's a disconnect between the theological world, and as there sadly is, and church leadership, the episcopacy.
So I am planning my wedding, and it's interesting. I've heard from one person in particular who I met at Liberty. This person's associated with the school.
With Liberty.
Still, yeah.
Right. Why is it so terrible to go to a gay wedding? But it is not terrible to go to a Jewish wedding. Let's say, seriously, if your daughter, let's say if you decided to convert to Judaism and you married Andy, who was Jewish, right? Mm-hmm. Your parents would probably be disappointed, I would assume, or confused or whatever. But the idea that they couldn't go or would refuse to go, it's very surprising to me. So I think Catholics need to see it in light of that it is a different tradition, it is a different belief system that most Catholics are used to, but it's a support of somebody. It's supporting the person that you love. So it's very sad to me that people still agonize over this, and also that they're in a sense trapped. You hear stories about people posting pictures online and other people losing their jobs, and it's very disturbing to me because frankly, most LGBT weddings, gay weddings, we can say, are civil weddings because that's just the way it is. And so you're going to a civil affair. How is that? Why is that any worse, in a sense, to go to a Jewish wedding? I have a very hard time with that. Because what you're saying is, it's worse to be a Christian and gay than it is to reject Jesus and be straight. That's the implication. Is that really what we're saying? And for a lot of Catholics and a lot of church leaders, I think they believe that.
My parents wouldn't call me gay for a long time because, they're Pentecostal. They didn't want to sort of give Satan any foothold over me. So they refused to say it. But it was only because I didn't call them crazy. I feel like they've sort of come around. And I really think it was because I just had to say, God, I have zero patience with this. I need you to give them grace through me. And I really think it's because I was able to build that bridge that now they're coming around. I don't know that their theology has changed, but I know that they're coming and, walking me down the aisle.
I think that's a beautiful story. And I think that, certainly, and who knows if they would have come around even if you had been, more sort of vocal about your displeasure about what they were doing. So you kind of cleared a path, and you were also very patient, and you prayed for them. You asked, and God did give them the grace to kind of come to see you. It's conversion, metanoia, right? I mean, it's this conversion of mind and hearts. They see you in a different way, which is, I think, what Jesus does. He invites people in his time to see people on the margins in a different way, to see Zacchaeus in a different way, to see the woman at the well in a different way, to see the Roman centurion in a different way. So I think that's beautiful. It's a great story. And that they can celebrate with you your love is beautiful. I mean, I would say, not so much what would Jesus do, but what are your parents doing? And how could God not rejoice in that kind of reconciliation and bridge building? How could God not love that? Whatever you think about gay weddings, how could Jesus not take joy in something like you just told me? It's sad. Have people said hurtful things to you?
I wouldn't say it was intentionally hurtful. I do probably hear it in a strong way. Like if somebody says, I can't come to your wedding because, because of my Christian ethics.
Sure.
I think, well, I have Christian ethics
Right.
too. Like, what are you?
Well, and part of it is also being patient with people, that they may not have had the same kind of encounters that your parents had or that your friends have, that they just don't have that experience or that background, and that eventually they will come to understand what you're doing. You might imagine someone who is against someone marrying someone of a different race or color. If someone said, well, I don't agree with that, you would probably feel more pity for that person. There's probably be some anger, but let's say someone in your office, I know that wouldn't happen here at the theology department of Villanova, certainly, but if someone in an office said to you, well, I hear you're marrying that person from West Africa, and I just cannot bring myself to go to the wedding, you would feel angry and probably insulted. You probably also would feel sorry for that person, like, wow, in this day and age, that person is still racist? Where is that coming from? So I think pity is probably Jesus, when he meets people who don't understand things, he said his heart was moved with pity. And also to always be open to those people changing. Because I think that happens a lot, actually.